Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and I am delighted to welcome a very, very accomplished radio host from Singapore, Michelle Martin. Michelle, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ashutosh. I'm so glad you're doing the heavy lifting today.
I was just going to say that you're a radio host, you're a TEDx speaker, you're a moderator, and it's good to get you on the other side of the show, so to speak.
Yeah.
Michelle is also the host of a finance show, which is titled Your Money. So, Michelle, let's start talking about radio host. Let's start with asking you, what is the work that you do as a radio host?
Yeah, I know. It sounds almost magical that I make a living out of conversation. It's so ephemeral, something we take for granted. And if you had told me when I was growing up that I would eventually pour my life energy into conversation, I would say, what? How? But you don't know how the universe works and shapes you and shapes circumstances around you. I mean, even around the family table, I would be the quietest. I have two younger brothers and they're far more exuberant. And I would be the girl who would disappear into her books. I loved reading. Books were my best friends. So if you told me that I would spend my life behind a mic, expressing myself, meeting people on a daily basis, thousands of interviews, I would say, no way. But then, it just shows that, the universe has bigger plans for you than you might have for yourself.
Very interesting. And, when you were deciding what to do, and Singapore offers some incredible careers for everyone, it's such a powerful economy. What motivated you to take the path of becoming a radio host?
Well, I always loved words. And so I knew that I would have a career in uncovering meaning in some way. I just didn't know what that would be. So whether it was copywriting or advertising. But once I started the route of journalism, I stepped into journalism. It was something that I loved doing, the facts, going after the facts, illuminating a facet of life that would then impact people who would come up to me and saying, because I heard you talk about this, I changed my opinion, I made this decision. And so it's a love of words and a love, the curious part of me that loves seeking out meaning and making sense of things.
Fascinating. And, I don't know too much about the radio and the media scene in Singapore, but in a country like India, where there are so many brands, I'd love to get your perspective on what goes into building a strong radio brand, other than, of course, all the communication. But I believe the radio jockeys or the radio hosts play a very major role.
Well, I think whether you're a brand, a person, or a host, connecting over the airwaves really requires an emotional quality. So there is no one formula, right? Some people are disarmingly frank. Others are incredibly clear. Some others know the art of telling, unfolding a thought sentence by sentence in a way that draws the listener forwards in an almost primal way. So we all tell stories to ourselves, right? Every day. But brands in this day and age, whether you're a corporation or you're an individual, they are very clear about what they stand for. Why do we switch off when someone is talking? It's an emotional thing, right? You can't quite quantify it. So it's passion, it's substance, part of it's intonation. But I think at the heart of it, it's honesty that holds everything in the mix.
Fascinating. And, when you talk about various subjects, is this a particular area that you focus on as a radio host, other than, of course, your TV program, which is the finance show?
I worked in TV and radio, and right now I'm focused in the business world and making sense of markets, making sense of personal financial decisions, entrepreneurship, how people make big things happen for themselves. People like you, how did you make your businesses such a success? Why are you starting this podcast? So we're pretty much on the same mission, really. It is about inspiring stories that in some way will spark some sort of positive change.
Wow. And, as you were building your digital audio brand, Michelle, what were some of your learnings and some of your challenges?
So one challenge building my brand was how not to fall into despondency when you're faced with organizational voices that blunt the process of creation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, truly creating in my books means a posture where I am in service to my listener.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I'll give you an example, wanting to publicize a very good insurance plan, but perhaps being told by the client, we don't want this to be too successful because we don't want the very people that could benefit from this plan to abuse it, to sign up in droves. So that doesn't make sense to me because, I mean, I have to say, Ashutosh, that I am ruthless when it comes to getting my hands on the information that I think is genuinely going to help a listener make up their own mind about the decisions they make in life. So anything that blunts creativity, stands in the way of the full picture, how not to be despondent in the face of that is a challenge for me.
Wow. I guess that's a challenge most human beings face, how when you're faced with any kind of a problem, how not to be despondent. And that's a great response you gave me. But let's now change gears a little bit and talk about how the whole landscape of communication, which has traditionally been, and I'm much older, it was the newspaper, it was the radio and the television and a little bit of cinema and so on. But now the entire landscape is changing with social media, devices in people's hands. Given that scenario, I've got a few questions for you. My first question is that how are traditional platforms beginning to adapt, traditional platforms like print, TV, or radio, adapting to so many other digital formats?
I think, from the perspective of a storyteller, you are then expected to be able to adapt your story across these different platforms. So I presented on television and I work on radio, and they're two very different mediums that require very different skills when it comes to storytelling, even when it comes to interviewing. Just the sense of where to put your hands, how to conduct yourself, your body language, your intonation, all that changes in these different mediums. But I think organizations, in a way, expect you to be able to put on these different hats. And so that stretches you in a way as a creative person. When I came into the field, it was in the 2000s. And so digital was already part of the mix.
Correct.
I was in the era when digital editing was physical for radio and people would tape things together. So I came in and it was already digitized for us, which makes things a lot easier. Back end, very little has changed recently. It's still you in a studio connecting live over a mic, because what I do is live radio, right? Thankfully, Siri hasn't replaced me yet. Touch wood, but you never know. So because it is live radio, and I think there's studies out there that show that live radio is still important and vibrant. People want it. As long as we're human beings, we're comforted by conversation. I think that's why people are like having the TV on in the house. Nobody's home, they're not watching, but they'll have something on because the voice is so comforting. It's company, right?
Well said. And yet, there is a channel in India, very popular channel, NDTV. And for a long time, they were continuously advertising that all their recordings were being done on Samsung phones. So how is technology beginning to change the TV and radio business?
Well, I think, as a creative person, to some extent, I can let the technology support me. And more that support is invisible. So maybe you don't see so many crew around you all the time because somebody's filming with one handheld, as opposed to, 6 different giant camera operators and huge crews. So it's packaged it and it's much neater sometimes, simpler. So technology can, to some extent, free the creative person to just focus on what's important, and that is the performance. That's what I would say.
And when you start your morning preparing for your day ahead, for my viewers and listeners, tell me, how many shows do you do and how do you prepare for them?
It never stops. I think if you're a journalist, you're continually thinking, you're continually on the clock, you're watching TV, something flashes up about China Evergrande and the bonds, and you're thinking, how can I spin this into a story? And, 3 hours of radio a day is a lot of thinking. As you know, for your podcast, you come up with your questions, you send them to the guests ahead of time, you prepare, whoever's coming on so that you get the best out of them and you get the best for your program. And so there's a lot of back-end work that needs to happen. And for me, actually, not pouring my entire life energy, because it's very easy for that to spill into your entire life where you're never off. You are always ideating. And having some sort of, boundaries of like, I will do this 3 hours before I go on air, and off air, I will try to do this for 2 hours. And in terms of email, so controlling the email monster is important to me. But the ideating, I mean, if I'm honest, Ashutosh, it goes on throughout the day and night even.
No, but my question was, I'm very often on CNN News 18 as a guest, pontificating on something silly. But you're a host, and I know the kind of work TV hosts do. And you mentioned it in the beginning, the heavy lifting. I'd like to understand what goes into preparing for something that is being watched by millions of people, and who are probably responding. And since you're in the finance world currently, they're probably taking tips from you and understanding what goes into that preparation.
It's just hard work. It's elbow grease, Ashutosh. You're reading everything that you can about your topic, your subject, your guests before they come on. You're doing background reading so that you know how to come up with a follow-up answer before they come on. It's just hard work. It's so boring, but it's just hard work.
I agree. No, there's another aspect of the TV and the radio, which is where the revenues come from, the advertising. I've been speaking to many people, and earlier it was the entire advertising dollar was coming to 2 or 3 different media, but now it's going into multiple platforms. As a finance guru who's handling so many different things and a radio host, what are your perspectives on how is this trend beginning to shift? And what will it do to the traditional businesses or media?
Advertisers want targeted campaigns that reflect their targeted demographics. So that's good for us because advertisers know who they want to reach out to. In the past, it would just be, sort of a broad campaign and can you get word of mouth out, and they go on the strength of your medium. But, now they're always helping you as a content creator. I like knowing, okay, you want to reach out specifically to very successful entrepreneurs who've been on CNN. How do we do that? You want to reach out to millennials. Okay, how do we craft a campaign that's going to interest them? But they also want measurable results these days, right? And I think that's good because it keeps media companies on their toes, and they realize that, it all boils down to engaging content. And hopefully that trickles down to, media companies valuing the people who are putting this content together.
Interesting. Shifting gears again, I was approached by a couple of radio stations for podcasts. And I was wondering how important are podcasts for radio stations when you can hear the same thing on any personal device?
You can hear the same thing? What do you mean?
On the same podcast can be heard on your phone, not necessarily, on a radio program.
Well, podcasts are important because they increase the shelf life of what used to be a very ephemeral product, right? And so the longer your product lives, the better it is for your brand. It extends awareness of your brand, right? And I was surprised. Recently, I've gotten authors from around the world writing to me personally, reaching out personally, right? The world is shrinking. And so you get incredible guests writing personally to you. They used to come through PR agencies, but now because your show is spreading, my show, and yours, I'm sure, is spreading throughout the world. It's global. It's easier to have even more quality conversations because guests come forward.
Interesting.
Because of the reach.
Very interesting. So, let's talk a little bit about your show, Your Money. Tell me about what goes into Your Money and what is the hypothesis of this program?
Okay, so I host wonderful conversations from 9 a.m. every morning that I hope will in some way illuminate the relationship that we all have to money. Just today I was talking with a man who has shared with me how he's done his research, and most of our habits about money are shaped by the age of 7. And so he's written a book that will help young children understand not only the concept of money, but how to invest.
Amazing.
Yeah. So it's about markets as well. A lot of people hear things about there's a whole spread of individuals. Some might have been investing from the time they had money, but there's some people for whom the stock market, making money in the stock market, is a new concept. And so it's about reaching out, and financial education is what I'm passionate about. And it's about making sense of what can be a very obtuse world, right? Inflation,
Yes.
S&P 500, and NASDAQ is up, and the Fed is signaling a monetary tightening, and GST is rising this year. What does this all mean for me? Where do I put my money? And so we try to make the decisions, good financial decisions, an achievable goal for everybody.
And you have a lot of people calling in to speak to you, or writing to you on programs.
Ashutosh, now it's all WhatsApp, Ashutosh.
Okay, so WhatsApping you?
Yes, they do. WhatsApping their questions and emailing their questions as well. And that's always good to, keep that channel open, so you get real questions from the ground coming into the show as well.
Amazing. And you said your money is now being heard across the world.
Yeah, I mean, last year, I, someone sent me a little screen grab, and it was #1 on Apple's charts for investing for Singapore.
Wow.
But I was so happy that my show reached #1. But if it's on Apple's charts for Singapore, it's available on Apple's iTunes, which means it can be heard around the world. And every year around New Year's, I get a message from a fan in Japan, and he always tells me how the show means so much to him. And I'm always stunned, because I don't cover much in Japanese markets, but for some reason he listens, he's a fan, and he writes, and it's great. So
you're covering more than Singapore markets now.
Oh, yes. I mean, we look at US markets overnight. We look at emerging economies. I mean, it is markets as a whole, global markets, but from a Singapore perspective.
Very interesting. So, Michelle, I'm now going to move to a few questions for you personally. I've got interesting feedback from a lot of my viewers and listeners that they love to get to know my guest a little better.
Great.
So my first question to you is that, you told me you were the quietest child around your parents' dinner table, became a radio host. My question is, what would you say are 3 key milestones or pivot points in your life or your career so far? Okay, well, since I talk about money every day, I shall tell you about my first money lesson, which happened when I was 4 years old. So I remember wanting to buy my mother a present. And my mother at the time was taking a course, a seamstress course in Shanghainese sewing, which apparently is invisible to seams. So anyway, I wanted to buy her a box of threads, because they were the most magical things that I'd ever seen. Emerald, all sorts of colors in this box. It just captured my imagination. And I remember walking to this little store with my dad and saying, I would like to buy that for my mom. And he said, all right, where are you going to get the money? And I thought, what? I thought you were going to give me the money. I'm 4. I have to earn this money. And, it was the first time I realized that it wasn't just going to be handed to me. And this whole concept of where money comes from was, came to the fore. The second milestone for me was I was 9, and I really wanted to make the athletic team, really. But for some reason, I wasn't chosen. And I went home, and my mom said, well, on sports day, you're just going to have to show them. So I took part in 5 races, and I won a gold in all 5 races. And true enough, the next day, the athletic head approached me and offered me a spot. So that was a lesson in show, not tell. And the metrics will stand for itself, right? And my last lesson, I'm not going to tell you my age. So just recently, last year at the Singapore Writers Festival, I was invited to speak with an author who I really respect. So she's Elizabeth Gilbert, and she's written Eat, Pray, Love, the movie starring Julia Roberts, and it's a huge hit. And at the end of the interview, which I adored, she said to me, Michelle, she has a podcast of her own, by the way. She said, I know how much work goes into being able to weave
an effortless conversation.
Correct.
So from one who knows to you, Michelle,
Mm.
I see the work that you've put in, and I thank you because it shows respect for your guests. And I was just, it's so great when like a fellow practitioner understands the
Mm.
amount of effort that it really takes for something that looks so easy,
Oh, fascinating.
So, we all need a little pat on the back from our mentors, and that was great.
Absolutely. Fantastic. So I have time for two more questions for you.
Mhm.
My next question is, you're recognized, you've got people following you all over the world. What has success been to Michelle?
Success. You're only as successful as your last show in a way. I mean, people like to say, but don't you build on your success? I mean, if you're a performer, it's like if you're a trapeze artist, you've got to grab that handle after you've made the jump. So every show is a fresh success. Have I hit my own benchmarks from making something understandable, for making it interesting, for bringing out the best in my guests, and for making the topic understandable to have I served my listener? Every show is a fresh success. Fascinating.
And my last question to you is a follow-up question to success. Who or what inspires you?
Who or what inspires me? Gee, just about everybody I speak with.
That's an easy answer.
Isn't it? Yeah, but you don't get on my show if I don't admire you in some way. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Michelle, on that note, thank you so much for speaking to me. Thank you for taking me down this incredible journey you have had and are continuing to have as a radio host, as as the host of Your Money, which is now being heard all over the world. And thank you for talking to me about all the changes that are beginning to take place in the world of media. Thank you.
I wish you all the best. Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.